Yeah, Halloween today.
We're good.
Good. You're busy.
Yes.
I'm very impressed.
Doubling up or tripling up, right?
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
had to sit through 3 meetings last week, so only 2 today. All right, we still got 30 seconds or so. Was the longest 30 seconds. Just waiting for
Just
that
watching it.
clock to switch over. There it is. It's 5 p.m. We are going to call this Community Development Committee meeting to order. Gwendolyn Fullerton is here. Kelly McClymans is here and Brittany Rock is here, and we have all of our staff here. So now we're going to go on to approval of the minutes. I did not see any changes. So we have approval of our minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Did anybody else see any changes to the minutes? Did you read through them? Okay, we do not have any department presentations or reports. So we're going to move down to our discussion items and actions. So we have AB 24-83, Resolution 24-83, authorizing a professional services agreement with BHC Consultants for stormwater improvements, project design. Am I on the right thing?
That's on the minutes
Am I on-
from last week.
Oh, I'm in the minutes.
So that's okay. You're on
Yes. Okay,
AB
so
2486.
AB 2486, Resolution 24-86. This is the statewide small works roster. Okay, apologize for my mistake there.
Very easy one. I made that mistake when I was reading it, preparing for the meeting.
I don't know what is going on with my computer. It's just moving on its own. I have a ghost running my computer right now. There we go. All right. Okay, so that is going to be given to us by Ken, correct? Or, okay.
I meet Dion Payne.
Yes.
It's nice to meet all of you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Dion.
Okay, so this agenda bill and resolution is to update our statewide small works roster. I'll give you a little bit of background. Since 2008, MRSC, the Municipal Research and Services Center, we've had a contract with them to administer our small works roster projects. Small works roster projects are for public works projects that are $350,000 and less, and doing the bids and using vendors off of that small works roster. So as of July 1st of this year, the Department of Commerce has officially designated MRSC as the statewide small works roster. So the only difference is that it's the official statewide one. It's still the $350,000 level is still the same. There was a couple other tiers in there. There are no longer any tiers. And we just need to, back in 2008, we had a resolution to use MRSC for our statewide small works projects. And now we need to repeal that and just update it to have it be them as the statewide small works projects. We don't have to have a contract with them anymore. They are the statewide small works projects. If we don't use them, we have to come up with our own roster. She's all over it. She's ready.
And then we'll have to have them approved, and they'll have to go through the approval certification process.
Right, we would have to administer it in-house ourselves, and we just don't have the capacity to do that right now. So, any questions or anything else I could explain about the small works process?
This doesn't require a budget item, really.
No, it
per
doesn't.
se. Okay.
And there's no refund.
I've heard that, so since the MRSC is now the statewide, they actually have more companies to choose from because the roster has expanded since they're not like an option. They're like literally anybody who wants to get on a roster for any of the cities would have to go through MRSC.
Correct.
So we have an expanded version of people to look
It's still a
at.
state, it's now become a statewide bureaucracy, which to me
Yeah.
is like, it smells, right? I mean, it, you know, the thing is practice will tell us.
Mhm.
So if we were to unwind this, we could do that at any time is the way I.
Correct. Correct.
From here on out, we can just say, no, we're not using small works anymore. Has small works been a good thing for us?
Yes, it is. Instead of small works is a different bidding process. There's not as many hoops. It's limited steps as compared to a competitive sealed bid process.
So what's the bad news story with small works projects?
Councilmember Phillips, I've used that exclusively over my career, and I would second what Dion says, is it saves you a bunch of hoops and steps. It's for projects under 350. You put together your bid package, you go on your small works roster, you pick the contractors or the services that you need, and there's a whole pool of contractors there, and immediately notifies those contractors of your project. So they don't have to go read it in the Bonney Lake Courier Herald and Enumclaw, like you would have to do advertise for a federal project. It gets your project out there to contractors that are across the state that want to work for Bonney Lake. And the more contractors you have bidding on your project, the better the public works bid process works in your favor.
So is there a requirement to be, or have organized labor or bargaining units, or is it just prevailing wage? Do we know?
Prevailing wage, I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, the $350 threshold doesn't add the other things. The state has
Right, okay. Oh,
for higher dollar projects.
And there are multiple vendors within every category. So when bidding, they are bidding against one another. You're not locked in. Let's say there's only, I'm just throwing this out there, there's one electrician, you have to use that electrician, and they have rates that high because nobody else has been approved by the state to be on that list. There's always multiple.
Yeah, there's always multiple. So the electrical, there's 100 or 1,000 electrical contractors in that for every category. Yeah.
And
Civil.
And then every year, sorry to jump in, every year the state does put out, hey, we're updating the small works roster. Do you want to join it? And that's actually goes out in a number of newspapers. And then the cities who are participating in the small works roster, which is why we have the the resolution, says, and these are the cities that are participating. And then people can join the small works roster at any time. Sorry, Ken, I didn't mean to step over you if you were saying something. I
Have we filed
apologize.
any complaints with people that have, or contractors that have
That
done
we
work
used
for us?
to.
Yeah,
No,
no.
And I will say it is very time consuming and labor intensive to develop your own small works roster, because you would have to do it for every type of contractor. And the pool that the city could get will not be as large as a state pool, because that's statewide versus just limited to Bonney Lake.
Yeah, but how many small contracts do we have? What do we typically contract for at this level?
Oh,
For the
okay. I mean,
smallest.
yeah, there's tons of them.
Chip seal, striping, seal coating, things like
some
that.
overlay projects.
Yeah,
Overlay
of-
project.
anything that your engineer's estimate is below 350, you're gonna be using this method because it's so much quicker and easier.
Some other ones, the flooring that we did in the modular this year was a small works roster project. The
Painting, senior center.
painting the scene, yeah. So any of these little projects that we're doing, that are less than $350,000, we are using the small works roster to get those bids into the city.
And we already use it now. It's just now it's become statewide, so we have to rewrite the ordinance that's who we use. So are you okay with that?
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't sound like there's, very feasible options, right? We could say no. And then in about a year, staff will forgive us and talk to us again.
mhm.
Um, but what's
I
that
don't
by?
see a reason, I can't comprehend a reason why we would say no, giving the city more options,
Well, the
but
real question is it
you
gonna
know,
save us time or we're gonna
it
get
saves
better
us time
quality?
and money, I would say, but
Yeah. Or is it gonna serve the contractors that live in the city limits better, right?
yeah.
I can't answer yes.
We can only choose, we have to choose the lowest bidder, as according to my understanding. So if the lowest bidder lives in Bonney Lake, then they're gonna get the bid. So,
But everybody has an
whether-
opportunity in that category.
If we weren't part of Small Works, could we prefer vendors in Bonney Lake?
Nope.
Why
Nope.
not?
Against the
Why not?
law. It's against the law.
Which
Under-
law?
State bidding
State law?
laws. Yeah,
State?
state bidding laws
RCW
require,
39.
Yeah. Same one.
I knew
Right.
Yeah.
Dion will-
I knew Dion can nail the RCW perfectly, but yeah, state law requires that we accept the lowest responsive bidder, and we can't make preferences for contractors that have their headquarters in the city of Bonney Lake.
Okay, all right.
yeah, I'd like to give every contractor in Bonney Lake a contract if we could, you know.
Yeah,
just to
yeah, we're
benefit, so
spending
they
their
can work
money.
and live in the same community,
Yeah.
which is what we're all trying to do, right? But,
Yeah, so that's not.
we have to be fair.
Or we have to obey the law.
So is this, because there's no really any money involved here, this is gonna be changing an ordinance. So would,
Changing a
resolution, so this is a resolution of the council, okay. So would you recommend taking this to full council or discussion, or should we just go ahead and put this on consent?
And say probably consent makes sense because there's not a lot of options, right?
Yeah.
They answered all the questions.
Mhm.
I think we're,
Not much more to discuss
Yeah,
or other options, so.
right, okay. I'll say that we're going to put this on the consent agenda for the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to item number 2. And that is gonna be AB 24-92, resolution R 24-92, accepting PSRC's Safety Action Plan grant. And I believe that 93 and 92 are kind of somewhat connected. Correct.
Thank you for meeting with Jason and talking about this. You can almost get the presentation. You know, they are joined at the hip. So I'm gonna present them both. It's kind of a combined, but basically PSRC stands for Puget Sound Regional Council, which Bonney Lake is a member of, right? So this is a grant that is a nationwide grant program that Bonney Lake was part of a multi-city application that PSRC put together for us. Total was about $2.2 million. Our share of it was around $120,000. So I'm gonna try not to upload you guys with too many acronyms, but Safe Streets and Roads for All is what this program is called nationwide. And if you want to read a little bit more about it, I stuck something into your
thank you for that.
packet.
Yes.
Right. So basically what I've highlighted in orange is like the meat and the potatoes of it, but it's basically a grant for local communities to implement, plan, and demonstrate activities as part of a systematic approach to prevent deaths and serious injuries on your roadways. Okay. And the systematic approach is another flyer that's actually in your or on the next topic. So it lists all the 9 components that is being in the safety action plan. And Ryan Shea is here to talk about safety action plan. His firm has recently completed one for the city of Montesano. Before I cut him loose, I want to make sure that I say a big thank you to PSRC senior planner Gary Simonson. So he's the one that put together the contract. It's called a sub-award agreement. That's part of your council packet tonight. That's what this resolution is asking our mayor to sign. And what it is, it's a $30K match. So just so that we're clear on the money and what we're spending and what we're getting ourselves into. Exhibit B is what I'm talking about in your council packet. So, and down at the bottom is the sum. It's a total of 120K, right?
It's on page 32.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulton. We have to come up with about $30,000, right? So the scope and fee that I'm presenting to you tonight is around $90,000. So the city needs to kick in $18,000. PSRC comes up with 72. The other neat part about this grant is it covers staff time, primarily Dion and myself. And shame on me, I didn't summarize it, but that's if you add up the personnel and the fringe benefits, city puts in about 12 grand. The grant puts in about $48,000. So the sum of those two numbers, and I know I don't like to get math very much, but 48,000 and 72,000, that's the $120,000 total grant. With that, I'm going to thank PSRC for that funding. Thank Jason for chasing it and getting it and obtaining it. And then I wanted to, because there's no money spent signing the grant, I wanted to go on and turn on to the next one, which is a scope and fee with Shea Carchul to actually do the work. So I think
That's on page 37.
There you go. There you go. So as you flip through your packet, thank you so much. I'm catching up to Councilmember Fulton. Here we go. I will turn it over to Ryan to talk about.
Well, it
Safety action plans.
looks like the $30,000 match, you're wanting to take that out of the remainder of another grant that we had, or funding expenditures. We had extra money left over from the Church Lake Road and West Taps intersection budget to pay for a $90,000 expenditure. So there's still money left over from that, which is what you want to grab the 30,000 for, to pay for our matching portion.
Exactly.
Okay.
Councilmember Fulton is describing the budget information, which is in the second item, right? So as you know, we did an ICE for the intersection of Church Lake and West Taps, and we've got some budget left over there. This is a reimbursable grant, so we've got to come up with an entire amount, but we get reimbursed all except for our match. Okay.
The 30,000.
Yep. So does that clarify the money? I know I spent a lot of time spinning
Is it
around.
possible we don't get reimbursed?
I would highly doubt it. The only way that you wouldn't get reimbursed if you didn't sign the grant. That's what it wouldn't be, that you wouldn't get reimbursed.
So there's not gonna be some secondary or tertiary agenda bill is gonna come forward that we have to approve. So for example, we approved the housing study, right? And then that wound up with multiple zoning and ordinance changes, right? The secondary and tertiary things. Jason did a really good job at trying to control the growth, but that's still also, it really has affected our ability to try to minimize high density housing, right? Jason did a phenomenal job trying to protect us from it, but we still will always feel that from this state's government currently, right? They're nuts that way.
And that was because we had signed for a grant.
Right.
I think that was before I came on council,
Yeah,
but
probably was.
I think I had a kind of a basic understanding of what was happening with that grant.
The grants like this, I'm like, well, what are we gonna be kind of like having to say yes to later
right.
because we took this grant today,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So let's,
Exactly. So what are we tying down a future council?
yeah, let's,
Oh, I like that. That's a nice.
answer, uh, if we had a perfect crystal ball and we were able to look ahead, I'm looking at exhibit A, it's kind of a timeline, right? So, the uniqueness of this grant is it's not open-ended. It provides you with a funding mechanism. So, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds and about Ryan's topic, but Ryan's gonna study it. We look at our crash history. Out of that study comes projects to mitigate. One that I've presented to you already that we're working on during workshop is our roundabout, right? We've had 6, 8
I mean,
people
Yeah.
that we've had to send to the hospital on that during the last 5 years. The mitigation for that is not building a signal, it's building a roundabout there, to slow people down, right?
Veterans drive and.
Veterans and Angela, right, right. So that's an example, okay? I can share with you my experience at the city of Shelton and the city of Fife. With the same consultant in Shelton, preparing a local road safety plan. That's a state project, or state plan, a state source of funding. This is a federal nationwide start. However, by preparing this plan, it allows Bonney Lake to apply for both, right? And that's a funding mechanism that Bonney Lake has never had access to, but our peers do. So that's really the outcome. So perfect. So in April, we're finalizing the plan. We're bringing it to you for adoption. We're telling you, these are the projects. These is what we found where we have our crashes around town. This is where we're hurting people, right? These are the projects that we need to go mitigate. Council, we're going to go apply for a grant through the local road safety plan funding or this safe SS4A funding and apply for it. What do you think? That's what we would be tying you to. We'd be saying, hey, we want to go mitigate this. We want to go fix this. Let's go after some grant funding. And then the tie point, I want to come back to that. The match, right? Federal funds require a 13.5% match, right? So we'd be looking to budget that match in our future projects. Does that answer your question?
So what I heard you say is that this study is gonna give us a list of projects that we think will improve safety in the city. And as we execute those projects, if we get federal funding, we'll be obligated for a 13% match.
If it's federal fund, it requires a
Does
13.5%.
that include the studies?
The study,
Not this study,
I'm
but,
sorry,
but I'm assuming like, the ice study we did on, what was it? You just said it.
Veterans Memorial and Angeline Road.
No,
Church
Well,
Lake.
Church Lake and West Taps,
and
yes.
West Taps, right? I mean, to me and to many of my constituents, believe me, I get this question a lot. Once a month at church typically,
Mhm.
why can't we just put a stop in there, right? And all I can tell them is we did a traffic study, right? And traffic study says we can't do it. We're gonna do something different, right?
Mhm.
That is one of the top two road areas that we're looking into with this grant, is my understanding. So the first top number one is Angeline and Veterans Memorial. And the second number two project would be Church Lake Road and West Taps Road.
Yeah,
So
Or
that's
stop signs.
our stop signs or whatever.
yeah, whatever.
Whether it be a
There's-
roundabout or,
So that's
you
that's where
know.
I'm kind of poking on. I'm afraid of getting pinned down with, they'll say, oh, it's roundabout, because then we're gonna take people's property,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And will roundabout solve the problem there? I don't know, right?
So-
I wanna say, I wanna trust the experts. Common sense says 2 stop signs.
Yeah.
Right? Will fix the problem,
Right.
right? And, oh, by the way, they just fixed the similar problem over on Forest Canyon, right? By putting 2 stop signs in. I drive through that one every day as well. I love it, right? Very rarely is there a lot of traffic there. So I just look at this and I go, well, are we just enabling a large bureaucracy that's set up to do all this stuff and then turn around and say, let's do something that costs a lot more money than two pieces of wood, and a couple of signs.
So I'd like to say, can I just say something, Councilman McClymonds? The road safety action plan would be a plan that's developed locally through, and I'm sure Ryan will get into this more, through public input, and we'll work with council to identify solutions. At Church Lake and Church Lake and West Taps, the roundabout was not the preferred option. It was like, that's too much of a right of way take, too much of a cost. It really doesn't solve the problems. So there's not an objective that it's one thing or another. But what it does is it starts to identify to the council, here where we're having traffic problems, here's where we need to have implementation measures, here's what they are. Those are approved by council. What it does is, by having that plan adopted, it unlocks the door to a number of different funding sources in order to complete those projects without having to have the full freight on the city's dime. So it's projects that we identify, that we pick, and we identify the solution in our locally adopted plan, so that we can then look for additional state and federal funding sources to complete those projects that are off the table to us right now because we don't have the plan in place.
So if somehow we decide two stop signs works, we could go forward and look for a grant for that.
And then we could use the statewide small works roster.
So I think at this point, it might be helpful to like,
That's definitely over $360,000.
Two stop signs? Oh.
so
It
I
was
think,
$500,000 for the study.
so I think it might be helpful for Ryan to kind of walk through what's in a road safety plan or a safety action plan, so we understand what's in the plan, and kind of understand what the outcome of this whole effort is.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk through that. As Ken talked about, for longer now, the state's been running a program promoting local road safety plans. It's functionally almost the same as this federal program for these safety action plans. And in both cases, the main aim is to kind of collect all the recent crash history for the citywide and then look for patterns. So, it's kind of all stemming from like removing fatalities from our roads. So the focus is on fatal and serious injury crashes. So we'll hone in on citywide, how many of those crashes we had, and then try to look at the underlying factors of those crashes. Like 5 of them happened on 410 and it was because of high speeds. Well, that starts to direct our attention towards maybe countermeasures that affect that particular problem. But we'll look at all of the what we call severe injury crashes, those serious injury and those fatal crashes. We'll do a lot of data analysis early on. All of this information is housed with WashDOT, so all the state patrol and police reports get sent over there, and then they'll provide them to us. So we'll have all the crash reports over the most recent 5-year period, and we'll look for those trends. But then as Jason was saying, a big part of these plans is getting in front of the community and letting them communicate to the city and us of where are they feeling unsafe on the network. And that often overlaps with where we have the crash data, but it doesn't always. And it's important for plans like this to speak to both the data and the public concern. I mean, it's not hard to envision scenarios where there's no crash data for pedestrians on this one road because everyone knows it's dangerous, so no one walks there. So therefore, there's no pedestrian crashes. Well, it's still unsafe, and that's where we look for the public output to tell us about problems that maybe the data misses. And so the plan then looks to kind of stitch those two things together, like where the data says there's need, and then where the community is saying they're concerned. And then there's also an element of in the outreach aspect, which specifically will include council in addition to broader outreach in terms of coming up with how we prioritize. Because eventually what we'll do is we'll come up with, okay, here's the 15 spots in town, whether it's a road segment or an intersection that we feel like there's a need. We'll come up with some recommended countermeasures, but then we'll work with the community and the council to figure out how do we prioritize these projects, which ones are the most important. Going back to earlier talks, like maybe Veterans Memorial and Angeline is a top priority because there's already a lot of momentum there. But we can come up with the criteria to prioritize those projects. And the ultimate outcome is to have a plan that kind of creates a roadmap for what the city was looking to do to address safety deficiencies within the city limits. And then, as Jason said, specifically WashDOT through their HSIP program, and then the feds through this SS4A program, they have a lot of money for getting these improvements built, but a specific prerequisite is having a safety plan adopted. So it checks a box to get in the door for these funds, and those are separate decisions that are made later, and you can specifically pick the projects that make sense at that time. One thing I was going to mention, that the WashDOT program, as of right now, has no match obligation, so it's 100% funded, and that's an every other year cycle. We'll be in line to submit for that. I think they just had that cycle this year, so it'd be like February of 26. We'd be in position to submit to that funding opportunity. In the schedule that Ken shared, the SS4A program is an annual eligibility for the implementation funds. And you talked a little bit about getting projects built versus do we have to do more studies and then build the projects. So the SS4A program has like two distinct funding buckets. The city's getting money through PSRC in the planning bucket, and that bucket also contributes to any like follow-up studies that are identified as needs. So we will do what we can to work with council and the city to come up with not just where we think there are problems, but what's the appropriate countermeasure to address it. There's often more than one legitimate way to address a problem. So it could be a community preference for A over B. But in some cases where if we say, hey, this intersection is problematic and it maybe needs a bigger evaluation than we can handle in the citywide assessment of safety, then the safety plan can identify the need to study that further. And this federal program can be used to pay for those studies, as well as actually building countermeasures. The WashDOT program is really just for building things, and they don't really fund follow-up studies, but the SS4A program will. So that's something that we'll work through. If we find, and it's really going to be more specific, I think, to if there's an intersection like a Veterans Memorial and Angeline that kind of needs its own outreach effort and its own evaluation of alternatives, then we would include some of those as follow-up work that this broader study safety plan would recommend. But the goal is to have a lot of implementation countermeasures identified. We'll have cost estimates in there. So there'll be a known price tag and a known project, and then you can go and try to get funds to build them and or direct your own funds, depending on the cost, to kind of get some of these, prioritized and implemented. These plans are not a one size fits all. So every community kind of handles the outreach differently, kind of, who gets involved and how often and when. So that's something that we'll work out with Ken and Jason. Certainly we'd be going to council, but as far as what that community outreach looks like, we like to do online surveys. We can also do in person. Sometimes it's a hybrid, but the nice thing about the online for this sort of plan is we really want to just hear from people. Where are they worried or concerned? And it's really easy with these online surveys. They can just put a pin on a map and say, I'm worried here. And they can say why. And it's easy to then digest that and replicate it and put it in the report later. So I think we would advocate for at least an online survey, but there's also opportunities to do in-person survey work. I think that's kind of the crux of what we'd be looking to do. Ken, and then does anything come to mind, or Jason, that you didn't hear me say, or I'm happy to answer questions?
No, I think you covered it.
When's the last time we did a safety survey like this?
We have never done one, which is why we've never been able to apply for these funding sources.
So how do we decide what to work on?
Well, Ken, I'll let you kind of go and then I'll go. You look at you and say something.
He's a new guy.
It's driven by your crash data. Right.
So we do look at crash data.
You're looking for, Ryan mentioned, your severe crashes, your fatalities. That's what you're focused on. You don't want that to happen again.
And actually, that's one thing I didn't touch on. So historically, safety investments have been very focused on reactive measures. Oh, someone got hurt there. Let's try to address that. So these plans are trying to be more proactive. So you look at the data, you see kind of like I mentioned before, what are the themes, or are there themes? What are they? And then if you'd identify that, hey, we're seeing crashes on fast roads, on the curves of fast roads, maybe narrow shoulders, like, well, these 3 curves had those crashes, these other 3 haven't. But the kind of the newer thought process is the crash location's a little bit arbitrary. If the conditions are the same, then it could have easily happened at this other location, and that's maybe tomorrow's crash. So these funding sources are looking to provide money for what they call systemic solutions. So you're not just fixing where the crash occurred, you're fixing all of them at once. And so you're kind of stopping tomorrow's crash and addressing today's crash. So like Ken was saying, the city is actively doing things when they see the crash reports, but this plan is going to look to project out threats or, issues within the community that haven't had that crash yet. And hopefully we can get in front of that crash and solve it before it happens. But that's just kind of going to be based on the data that we have. And if there isn't always an obvious correlation between these crashes, and so those systemic arguments kind of take shape once we see what the data says. But that's one of the main goals of this plan, is to try to look systemically at where we have deficiencies in the city, and then that we can get eligibility for improvements with or without an actual fatality. Because that's kind of been like a dirty secret with funding, is if you don't have a death, it's hard to get the money, because that one does. And so why would you pay for this first? But they're really trying to put forward these systemic projects and prioritize them. So there's definitely real money out there for projects that can fix problems that haven't had those severe injuries yet. And that's a big, I think, benefit of these plans.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, and that's the other part of this that, Ken talked about, we do look at our crash data and our crash history, but the other part of this plan looks at where the community feels unsafe and they don't go. And so there isn't crash data or crash history because there hasn't been one, because the people aren't there because they feel unsafe. So it's looking at both the crash history and the crash data, and taking a comprehensive look at this versus kind of a reactive street by street look. It's more of a comprehensive look and allowing the council to help prioritize what the community is saying, what the studies are saying, and prioritizing those projects. So when we're laying out CIPs and Ken is chasing funding, and Dion's chasing funding, we know what the priorities are for the city council. Because sometimes these grant applications, they open and you have 60 days to write all the application material. And the more often you can know, here are the priorities and here's what we're working toward, you really start to develop this process where you can chase money for projects. And Ken and I have an old saying, where we need to get to is where we have, here's all the priorities, here's the baseline plans for them, and now we're chasing the money to get to final design and construction. It's really hard to go from, we want to do something and have nothing, to getting a successful grant application. So this is all of the baseline material that really go into feeding well. And the cities that do this and do this well get a lot of money. And I'm only going to use Sumner because they're right down the hill. Ken, how much did they get during this last funding cycle? And it wasn't all road safety action plan money, but what was their kind of total take this last time at PSRC?
Or 8 million.
Yeah, it was a big number. What I remember, Jason, is they had 4 projects funded and 2 on the kind of the reserve list, that if someone drops out, they get funding. So this last round of funding through our TCC, they really scored high.
And it was well into the multiple millions of dollars of grant funding that they got, because they had taken this approach of, you identify priorities, you identify projects, you get baseline design done, and then you go start chasing grants to get it all the way to the final design. And that's how you are successful in kind of a grant world of getting grants to help fund your transportation project. Am I saying that right, Ken?
Yes. And Leslie elbowed me and said, TCC, it stands for Transportation Coordinating Committee, and we're a member of that. So
On PSRC.
yes.
So, I know Councilmember Fullerton won't be surprised, but I'm not a big fan of PSRC.
Yeah.
Because it's an extra layer in government that is actually a little bit different than you would expect, right? Because nobody really elects anybody who's on there, but we all send elected officials there. I don't know. I mean, it just, to me, I think we could be better overall without it. Because then Bonney Lake could go to the county and say, hey, this is what we need. The county could go to the state and say, this is what we need. We have this, thanks to GMA, we have this regional council thing that is kind of a shadow government where maybe this is good though. Maybe this is the first good news I've heard for PSRC that they're bringing us a solution, right? Instead of telling us how we can manage our land,
So
right?
the bipartisan infrastructure law was created by Congress, so that's federal. But the PSRC is getting, they have the portion of the funds from federal, right? And then because if we sign this sub-grant with them, then we would be able to have discretionary funds given to us when we need to have projects, or we could apply for funds to help us with studies. And then also it would open, by having the agreement with them, it would open up us the ability to get more grants.
Yeah, I think you did a good job of explaining that. The Civil War grant pays for grant study
Right.
with 30% match.
30,
With the study,
yeah,
with the study in hand, then we can go. We have the ability to go chase after the local road safety plan funding, that's statewide, or the SS4A program, it's nationwide. But without this plan, we're sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Kind of what we're doing right now.
right, exactly.
And to be clear, like those future grant applications would not have to involve PSRC. Those would be directly to those different agencies.
Perfect.
They solicited this funds on behalf of lots of the cities around and then kind of saved the city a little bit of work chasing it.
Right, so the AB 24-92 is we need to agree to be a sub-grant of the PSRC.
Yeah,
And then the 24-93 would be approving the matching funds from leftover money from a previous project to pay for SCJ to do the study, the safety study.
yeah, and
So
the,
that then we can apply for more grant money.
yeah, and I would say the decision to use PSRC to get the grant from the United States Department of Transportation was a local decision. And so, grant applications are all about how do you make your grant the most competitive when it comes to scoring. And we had a decision to make. We could have petitioned directly to the U.S. Department of Transportation to apply for a grant to do the road safety action plan, or we could have partnered with all the cities in the region through PSRC to do it kind of at a regional level. That just makes that grant application look a little bit better to the feds. And so it just helped us, we felt it would help us get over the hurdle with the federal granting agencies and secure the funding, because they were more likely to award funds for a regional kind of approach versus just a city approach. And in reality, what PSRC is doing is the money that we would have asked the feds to give us, they ask on our behalf and are giving it to us. So it's more of in this case, PSRC is just the pass through from the United States Department of Transportation to us here at the local level.
Jason did a really good job
Oh,
describing that. Yeah.
And it's good news
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
PSRC.
Yeah.
In this case, they helped us out because dealing with federal granting agency, there's a lot of work there, and they took on all that heavy lifting for us. And all we had to do is tell them how much money we needed and what we wanted to do, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting with the feds. So it was a way of kind of using that, our involvement with that organization for a positive benefit for the city.
So, do we have any discussion on this?
I appreciate all the hard work. I
Yeah.
don't see, right? I've kind of tried to pick and be honest with what
Mhm.
I think and stuff. So I don't know. Sounds like we're gonna spend $30,000. It's gonna set us up for grants for
Mhm.
areas that we want and need to work on,
Mhm.
right?
And we'll be able
Which
to
is
apply for
some-
the grant
Right.
that we want to pay for those, so
Federal and
take it out of all of the only Bonney Lake taxpayers.
And,
Be statewide taxpayers, right?
and one nice thing about that 30,000, really only 18,000 of it is money that you wouldn't spend anyway. Because the other 12,000 is salary and benefits for Ken and Dion to work on the project. So that's salary and benefits that we would already be paying this year for those positions. So really if you want to talk about the money that's leaving the city that we would not otherwise be spending, it's about $18,000. The other 12 is salaries and benefits for Dion and Ken as they work on the project because it's a reimbursable grant. Part of their salaries will also be reimbursed to the city. So you'll actually get a savings on some of the salary costs this year and next year as Ken and Dion bill part of their salary back to the grant. If I explained that right, Ken?
Yes, but I also share to add to what Jay says is that when I was with Fife and Shelton, they had to pay for the whole thing all themselves. So this is a unique opportunity where you actually get the PSRC to pay for part of your study, and 86.5% of it.
I can't ever remember approving a $30,000 study. I'm excited. Do you? Can you remember?
Nope.
How many $30,000 studies have we had?
I think
Not
we
many.
had one that was 60,000, but most of them are about 250.
Yeah,
And then we have to change our zoning to get grants to pay for that
right, yeah,
250,
exactly.
right? So that's where we get into my question. Okay, so, for us, do we want to just go ahead and put one of these on consent, or do we want both of them to come up for discussion? I know Finance Committee, they usually try to, anytime we're taking money or adding money to anything, they like to put it on the full discussion. Yeah, full issues. So what's everybody thinking?
I think if you put one on full, you should put them both on full.
Mm-hmm, because they're kind of like combined, even though one is,
Because
Dealing
passing
with
one, and
grants,
approving the
yeah.
other
yeah,
is like a moot
doesn't make
point.
sense, yeah. So, I mean, I would like to put both of them on the consent agenda, but I think it's gonna
I would
get
as
pulled
well.
off the consent agenda
Yeah.
and put onto full council, so we may as well just avoid that step.
Yeah,
You think?
sure.
Are you good with putting it on full council? We'll discuss it at the next council meeting. Okay, the next available council meeting, but does this have a time frame that needs to be met?
It'll be
It would be
Okay.
next Tuesday, August 27th.
All right,
So as quick as, I mean, as quick as
sounds like a plan. And do I need to sign any of this?
I have
Because,
them.
okay, you
For
have
you.
them? Okay,
Yes.
fabulous.
Yeah, I was
Thanks,
gonna say,
Dean.
usually I have them all. Usually I have them all, but I'm not there. So I was hoping Dion had them for you.
Yeah,
On it.
so I'll actually need help filling these out because I don't, I
Okay.
usually just put a check mark in
Okay.
my little signature.
So I
Okay.
checked marked it already.
Oh, you already
I
did.
did, so if you just sign the.
You just need-
Oh,
okay.
well, that's for today, so it needs
Yep.
to have the date for the 27th on it then?
So that's at the
Okay.
bottom.
Okay. All right, so, do we have any open committee discussions at this point or any other questions, anything? Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, the sidewalk on, Church Lake. Right at the corner there, has been on our list for a long time. Is that just like dead? Is that OBE or?
It is, I believe it's going to be a 25 project. I was looking at this with Sherry and John yesterday with the CIP. The council prioritized 6 projects, and Ken, if you know something different, please jump in. But we prioritized 6 projects. We're doing Kelly Lake this year, leaving 2 projects left on that
Oh, that's
prioritized
right.
list. One of them was that curve, and then the other one, I believe, was on 84th. And both of those are what we plan to use our sidewalk money for in the 25-26 biennium project.
Yeah, Jason did a good job. I'd add, Drew Fonda's done a good job of knocking one off every year. Last year was Angeline Road, this year it's Kelly.
Oh, so we did put sidewalk in on Angeline last year.
Right, so, south, I can't remember the two developments, but there was a gap there on the east
Yep.
side.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
cause that street, Angeline, those sidewalks, for me, that's one of those safety things,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's like, those kids are down there and,
I picked up a lady on that road once looking for a ride. A cute little lady and she was like, carrying groceries. Oh, it's just, it's not safe.
So
I'm not gonna kidnap you, I promise.
okay.
Okay,
So I was wondering, so it's still on our list, we're still working through it. Okay, good, all right.
and
How
then.
did I miss that? Am I not paying attention? I haven't been on Angeline forever though.
There, I guess.
Yeah, I'll have to make sure I drive up and down Angeline a couple times.
Yeah,
If you're driving towards roads, like it's on the left side.
and then it looks like we have one member of the public that would like to, I don't see anybody online, so we've got about a few minutes here before we have to close up. So if you can, like, maybe about 5 minutes.
I'll be much quicker than that. My name's David Murdoch. I somehow got involved with the Greater Bonney Lake Veterans Memorial Committee. And, David Calvet, that's his name, sent out something to those of us who had expressed some interest or were involved. Apparently this effort has been, going on for well over a decade, to get some kind of Veterans Memorial in town. And he said, hey, I'm not able to continue this, looking for somebody to take the reins kind of thing. And I just retired from teaching. I said, hey, I can't do it. I'm retiring. I've got about maybe a little while. And after, the summer, I contacted him, met him, well, I'm busy this night, he's busy that night, met at Tunes at Taps, and happened to run into Councilmember Fullerton.
Yeah.
And here I am. And I know a little bit that there's some pot of money someplace, but mostly I wanted to get a point of contact, and I think it's Leslie.
Yes, and I will get you in
Yeah.
touch with Jason and Lauren. So we got his contact information.
Yeah, and just to, I won't say keep this ball rolling, because my guess is this ball has not been rolling. But to get this ball rolling again and get a fitting memorial for that does credit to veterans and their families and to Bonney Lake as well.
So
Thanks very much.
I have a question while you're here.
Yes.
So I asked this a lot of the time when constituents email me, is like, so if a constituent's a veteran, I ask them, do you want the Veterans Memorial be someplace that's more public so that the community can see it and remember veterans? Or do you want it to be someplace more secluded and solemn so that veterans can go there?
I think I would, I've given that, thank you for that question. I've given that some thought, and I've moved here 5 years ago because my grandchildren live in Seattle. And so I don't have any particular standing or any, I don't pretend to speak for all veterans. But I would like to see an area where, that's kind of both. That a place that is in the public that, so people can say, well, what's that? Oh, that's veterans, sure. Okay, but I would also like it to be somewhat immune from skateboarders and graffiti artists and people that want to find a place to sleep for the night, that kind of thing.
Sure. You have a good command of language.
Thank you. Anyway, I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your effort in honoring the veteran.
But thanks.
Did we have anybody online that raised their hand?
Last
Yeah,
week,
Here?
No,
Okay.
they're good before.
Oh, okay, perfect.
council work meeting, we approved our parks plan and
We
yeah,
have.
do you have
Veterans
access to
Memorial
that
there.
material?
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
We were talking prior to this meeting
Right.
about the Parks, Trails, Recreation, Open
Right.
Space Plan.
Yeah, because right now it has the memorial right here across the street.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
good.
that plan, and I guess before, what struck is that I would drive by Main Street and Cross 410 and saw the sign, hey, this committee stuff, and I said, lived there for a little while and that sign's been there and nothing else. So I contacted.
Good on you. Good job.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate it. Okay, anything else? I think we're going to adjourn our meeting. We've got about 6 minutes to get downstairs. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Try not to be
Safe
too
travels.
bad.